and we'll call you back.
Hello again. You're watching today on ENCA, DSTV Channel 43 with me, Dan Moyane. Now, South Africa will commemorate Human Rights Day next week on the 21st of March. Issues such as identity and cultural rights remain a central part of economic rights in our country. But many people will argue their human rights are infringed upon due to the slow pace of land reform. There has been a growing call for broader players to participate in land reform, including the private sector, philanthropists, and other non-governmental organizations. Let's discuss this further now with land reform expert Peter Setou from the Vumelana Advisory Fund. Dr. Setou, good afternoon. Welcome to today here on ENC. The intersection of the Bill of Rights, our human rights, and the issue of land. It's very, very, very significant and very strong in our constitution. But sadly, the pace of land reform has not really lived up to the promise of our constitution.
Thank you, Braden, for having me. You're quite correct. I mean, the issue of land reform is a constitutional imperative for us as South Africans. But equally so, the whole issue around the ability to be able to use that restored land for productive purposes is equally important. I think it is critical to highlight the fact that whilst government should be given credit in terms of land that has already been transferred to date, the truth is a number of these land parcels that have been transferred are either unproductive or are underutilized. So we need to make sure that the transfer of land goes hand in hand with post-settlement support so that, for example, before land is actually transferred, there needs to be plans on how these land parcels are going to be used, and also whether the beneficiaries have got the requisite capacity to actually work the land, including ensuring that there is a funding plan for such beneficiaries.
I guess the productive process you are talking about would enable more participation in the broader economy and help to address issues like poverty and inequality.
Absolutely. As I've said, I mean, we don't just get land. People are not just looking for land for the sake of just having the land. People are looking for land so that they can use it to improve their lives, so that they can address issues around poverty, so that they can create much needed jobs, etc. However, we are aware that the vast number of hectares that have already been transferred remain unproductive. And as Vumelana, we have been really driving this whole notion to say there is a growing body of evidence that the partnerships are critical in sustainable land reform. I mean, for us to really expect that government on its own will implement land reform, especially in the context of so many other pressing, demands on the fiscal, such as education. You've just now been dealing with public health care. I think it is important that we need to bring all the role players and stakeholders on board to ensure that we can deal with the challenges that are impacting on land reform.
Yeah, as you mentioned, stakeholders, I was thinking from an inclusion perspective, you've mentioned partnerships. How could that work? I mean, what are some of the insights that you at Vumelana have been gathering? What would be the best way or models to shape such partnerships?
Yeah, partnerships are important. And I mean, as Vumelana, since our inception, we have concluded about 26 projects which would attract in excess of 1 billion rands in private investments and really putting into productive use in excess of about 72,000 hectares of land. Now, one may actually argue to say, look, this is a drop in an ocean. However, if you look at it from a perspective that if we were to really replicate this, we would really make a dent to the poverty that we see, especially in the rural areas. However, it is important to note that to be able to support communities in this manner, to drive these partnerships that you are talking about, you really need money because you have to involve independent transaction advisors. That costs money on its own. So you need these transaction advisors to assist in facilitating these partnerships. Therefore, this collaboration between government on the one hand, the private sector on the other, and non-profit institutions such as ourselves who are working in this area. So these partnerships must, most importantly, be anchored on commercially sustainable, terms.
Yeah. In addition to the insight you've just shared about partnerships, what are the other current challenges that are facing land reform and land restitution in our country?
Well, thanks, Braden, for that question. I mean, the challenges that are impacting on land reform have, in the main, already been identified through several reports, some of which have actually been commissioned by government itself. We've got a high-level panel report, commonly referred to as the Motlanthe report, and we've got the presidential panel, advisory panel on agriculture and land reform. So these reports, in the main, have already identified some of the challenges, and these include, as amongst others, corruption that is often associated with this process or implementation of land reform projects. That's the one thing. Equally important, infightings amongst the communal property associations, including lack of effective mechanisms through which disputes could actually be resolved. You have a situation where if there are disputes within communities, it takes much, much longer for such disputes to be resolved, often to the detriment of what should be happening at ground level to make sure that the production does take place. Lack of coordination amongst, especially the state players. You'll find that there are a number of government departments who are in one form or another involved in land reform or agriculture or other sectors. It is important to foster closer coordination amongst these parties, because if you've got closer coordination, then you can make sure that the resources are used effectively and in a targeted manner. Lastly, but not least, I think poor monitoring and evaluation of the projects that are being supported. It is important that we have that in place.
Yeah, in less than a minute that we've got left in Tatasito, it's 21st March now, is next week, and it's coming up just before the 29th anniversary of our democracy. When you look at the overall picture from your insights, Ed Vumalana, how far have we got to go to make sure that land reform becomes a reality and a productive one?
Well, I think we still have a long way to go, if you were to ask me, if you look at the number of claims that are still outstanding. However, most importantly, we need to make sure that land that has already been transferred is actually used productively. To date, in excess of 8 million, between 8 and 9 million hectares of land have already been transferred to government. This is, in my view, very good progress. We, however, need to make sure that people who receive these land parcels are able to use such land productively, thus addressing poverty and creating much needed jobs.
Okay, thank you very much for your time there, Peter Sito.